18 years after the Cedar Ridge tragedy, no one expected to find anything, let alone a child's charm bracelet. The store was small, more like a forgotten attic than a business. Lauren Mitchell hadn't planned to stop there. She only ducked in to escape the rain, shaking droplets from her hair when she saw it, tucked beneath the scratched glass of an old jewelry case. A delicate silver chain, 5 charms, and a heart-shaped plate that bore a name she hadn't said aloud in over a decade. Madison J. Her throat tightened. Madison Jameson, 12 years old, loved dancing, loved apple slices dipped in cinnamon, disappeared in 2007 along with 13 classmates and their teacher. Lauren's fingers trembled. She'd been Madison's cousin, and now, somehow, Madison had come back. What comes next will change everything. To uncover the truth hidden in the shadows, stay with us. Subscribe to Missing Shadows, where every story whispers a secret. Lauren Mitchell didn't talk about the past, not because she forgot it, but because she remembered every detail too vividly. At 32, she worked as a freelance journalist in Portland, mostly covering human interest stories that were safe, distant, and emotionally manageable. She was good at her job. Too good, some said. The kind of writer who could make strangers cry with a paragraph, yet never shed a tear herself. Her editor praised her for her empathy, but if they knew how numb she truly was inside, they'd stop calling it a gift. Her apartment was neat, almost obsessively so, shelves lined with books, color-coded by spine. Framed photographs of city skylines and strangers' faces hung on her walls, but none of family, none of home. Cedar Ridge was a place she'd buried long ago. But the bracelet, when she held it in her hand earlier that day, something shifted. A tremor, not just in her fingers, but deep in the part of her she'd locked away since she was 14. Madison wasn't just a cousin. She was like a little sister. Lauren had braided her hair the morning she disappeared, had been the last one to see her off as the bus drove away. She never forgave herself for not going on that field trip. That guilt had shaped everything that followed. The cold distance from her parents, the way she sabotaged relationships before they ever became real. The stories she chose to tell, always other people's tragedies, never her own. But now fate, or something more twisted, was dragging her back to the very place she swore she'd never return to. And as much as she hated it, Lauren knew the story wasn't over. Not for Madison, not for the others, and definitely not for her. The morning of April 13, 2007, had been unusually bright for spring in Cedar Ridge. The sky stretched wide and cloudless, the air crisp with pine and possibility. Lauren remembered it like a photograph. Not the warm, nostalgic kind, but the type you stare at too long, wondering what came just after the shutter clicked. She was 14 and recovering from a mild flu. Her mom insisted she skip the school trip to the nature reserve. Just a precaution, she said. Lauren had thrown a tantrum. Madison had skipped into the kitchen that morning in her signature purple jacket, the one with the glittery butterfly patch on the sleeve. "Don't worry," Madison had chirped. "I'll take pictures for both of us." It was the last thing she ever said to Lauren. By sunset, panic had swept through the town like wildfire. The bus never arrived at the reserve. It hadn't returned to school. At first, everyone thought there'd been a delay or wrong turn. Then came the search parties, helicopters, police dogs, national headlines. But no wreckage, no screams, no skid marks, just silence, as if the earth had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. Lauren sat through endless interviews, therapy sessions, and candlelight vigils. But inside, she withered. In quiet moments, she'd replay the scene over and over. Madison waving goodbye. Madison laughing on the porch steps the night before. Madison's pink sneakers by the door. And always, Lauren wondered, what if I had gone? Would they have still vanished? Would she have stopped it? Or would she have vanished too? That question became a parasite in her mind, one she fed with guilt and what-ifs. It bled into her teenage years like ink and water, darkening everything. She withdrew from friends. Her grades dipped. The school eventually stopped calling. Even her parents, devastated in their own way, never quite found the words to bring her back. By the time she was 20, she had already changed her last name, moved out, cut ties, but the past never left. It lingered beneath the surface, waiting, and now 18 years later, holding Madison's bracelet in her hand, Lauren realized something terrifying. The silence hadn't been the end. It was just the beginning. Lauren hadn't planned on taking the bracelet with her. She'd meant to leave it with the store clerk, call the authorities, or at least photograph it and walk away. But when she tried to explain its significance to the teenage cashier, who looked more interested in his phone than her trembling voice, a strange desperation took over. She bought it for $5. No tax, no questions. Just a blank look and a plastic bag. Back in her apartment that night, Lauren placed the bracelet gently on her kitchen counter, as if it were a living thing. She stood there staring at it for minutes. Hours, maybe. The chain glinted in the warm light, each charm trembling faintly as the refrigerator hummed nearby. She poured herself a glass of wine, then didn't drink it. Her laptop sat open across the room, an unfinished article waiting like a ghost from her other life. But her eyes kept drifting back to the bracelet. That's when she noticed it, a tiny scratch beneath the heart-shaped nameplate, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. She leaned in, heart thudding. It wasn't a scratch. It was an engraving, faint, almost invisible to the naked eye. She grabbed a magnifying glass from her desk drawer, a remnant from old research days. There were numbers, coordinates, 43.2180 degrees north, 122.3957 degrees west. Her blood ran cold. The forest. That damn forest. The very one the bus was supposed to reach. Lauren's mind raced. Who engraved it? When? Why would someone add GPS coordinates to a child's bracelet and then donate it to a thrift store 2 states away? She didn't sleep that night. By morning, her suitcase was packed. It wasn't just the coordinates. It was the envelope. When she checked her mailbox before heading to the airport, there was a plain manila envelope tucked between grocery ads and credit card offers. No return address, no postage stamp, just her name, handwritten in black ink. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, slightly faded, but unmistakable. The school bus, number 14, parked beneath a canopy of trees. But the trees were wrong. They were overgrown, wild, not like the cleared trails of the state park. And on the window, someone had written in the condensation with their finger, "Still waiting." Lauren stood frozen in the hallway, the morning sun glaring over her shoulder. The air smelled like toast from a neighbor's kitchen, but she couldn't feel her hands. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was personal, targeted. Someone knew who she was. Someone wanted her to come back, and whoever left the bracelet and the photo knew something the world never did. The story wasn't done. It was about to begin. Cedar Ridge hadn't changed much in 18 years. That was the first thing Lauren noticed. The roads were still narrow, bordered by tall pines and ghosted-out gas stations. A faded "Welcome to Cedar Ridge" sign leaned to one side, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. But something about the town felt heavier, quieter, like it was still holding its breath. She checked into a local motel under a false name, a habit learned over years of investigative reporting. The clerk didn't ask questions. People in small towns rarely did. Her first stop was the public library. If she was going to trace the coordinates, she needed topographic maps, forest access records, anything the official reports might have missed back then. The librarian was a white-haired woman with sharp eyes and a softer voice, who gave Lauren a curious look when she asked for maps from 2007. You a reporter? The woman asked, folding her hands. Just researching something personal, Lauren replied. It wasn't exactly a lie. The librarian nodded slowly, then returned with a stack of dusty atlases and a manila folder marked Missing Bus, Public Archives. The town had kept a file, of course it had. In places like Cedar Ridge, unsolved mysteries aren't forgotten. They become part of the soil. As Lauren flipped through the contents, old articles, maps, search routes, faded photographs, one page stopped her cold. A grainy aerial photo from the original search effort. She leaned in. There, a clearing near the edge of the mapped trail. Rough terrain marked inaccessible at the time due to flooding. She cross-referenced the coordinates from the bracelet. Her pulse skipped. They matched. That clearing had never been fully searched. Outside the library, the wind picked up as clouds moved in, casting shadows over the town. Lauren stood on the curb, dialing a number she hadn't used in years. Ethan, it's Lauren. A pause, static. Then a voice, deeper than she remembered, but still unmistakably him. Lauren. Jesus, I thought you disappeared too. Ethan was Madison's older brother. He'd been 18 when the tragedy happened. Old enough to remember everything, young enough to be destroyed by it. The last time they spoke was at Madison's memorial service. He'd vanished from Cedar Ridge not long after. I need your help, she said. Another pause. Does this have something to do with the bracelet? Her breath caught. How did you... I got one too. His voice dropped. 3 days ago, different charms, same name, same coordinates. By nightfall, Lauren and Ethan sat in a booth at Granger's Diner, where laminated menus still smelled faintly of syrup and grease. He looked older, tired around the eyes, but alert, like someone who'd never stopped waiting. He laid his bracelet on the table beside hers. His had a tiny book charm and a golden acorn. Lauren's had the ballet slipper. Both had the same engraving underneath, the coordinates. We were never supposed to find these, Ethan murmured. Someone wants us back there. But why now? Lauren couldn't answer. All she knew was that every step forward raised new questions. Who left the bracelets? Why return them after 18 years? And if someone knew the truth all along, why let the silence stretch this long? They made a plan to reach the clearing by morning. Supplies, maps, gear. As they left the diner, a man in a tan jacket across the room watched them go. His eyes didn't blink. His plate was untouched. And when he stood to leave moments later, a small trail of red clay clung to the soles of his boots. The trail to the clearing was overgrown, almost defiant. Trees leaned into the path like silent gatekeepers, their limbs whispering warnings with every breeze. Lauren moved cautiously, boots crunching over moss and leaves, flashlight beam darting between shadows. Ethan followed closely behind, compass in hand, eyes scanning the tree line like he expected something, or someone, to step out. After 2 hours of hiking, they reached the coordinates. At first, it looked like nothing, just a wide, silent clearing surrounded by pine and fog, a few rotted branches, moss-covered rocks, a rusted fence post poking out of the dirt like a broken bone. Lauren's breath quickened. She stepped forward, and that's when she saw it, half buried beneath a collapsed log and years of forest rot. A curve of yellow paint, her voice caught in her throat. Ethan! Together they dug with their hands, scraping away years of dirt and leaves. Then they stopped. Side by side, they stared in the stunned silence. There it was, the bus. Bus number 14, rusted, bent, shattered windows, but undeniably real. Not in a canyon, not crashed or burned, just hidden, like it had been placed there. They pried open the side door. The hinges groaned like a dying thing. Inside, the seats were still intact, dust-coated, silent, empty, except for one. In the third row near the window, someone had carved something into the leather seat. Lauren leaned in, heart pounding. We were never lost. Her mind reeled. Never lost? What did that mean? Who wrote it? And why? A snapping twig outside made them both freeze. Ethan turned sharply, pulling the flashlight toward the trees. And then they saw him, the man from the diner, the tan jacket, the red clay still clinging to his boots. But now up close, his face struck Lauren like a lightning bolt of memory. Mr. Calder, Ethan whispered, that's the teacher. That's the man who drove the bus. It couldn't be. Mr. Calder was presumed dead. One of the victims. His photo had been in every news report, memorial plaques, services, tears. But there he was, alive, older, gaunt, but unmistakable. He didn't speak at first, just looked at them with tired, almost pleading eyes. You weren't supposed to come here, he said quietly. Lauren took a step forward. Where are they? Her voice cracked. The kids. Madison. What happened? He looked at her, then at Ethan, and something in his face shattered. His voice trembled. They're safe, he said. We kept them safe from what was coming. Lauren felt the air leave her lungs. What does that mean? You hid them? Calder nodded slowly, pain etched into every word. We were warned. That trip wasn't supposed to be a field trip. It was supposed to be an extraction, a rescue. The world, it was going to change. And the children, they were chosen. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. That's insane. You're lying. I wish I were, Calder said. We had to make it look like an accident. We had to disappear. They're alive. They've grown. But not in the way you remember. Lauren's vision blurred. The weight of 18 years crashed over her like a tidal wave. Relief, horror, disbelief, a million questions flooding her all at once. But one thought echoed louder than the rest. Madison was alive, and someone had kept that from her on purpose. Everything she knew was wrong, and the truth was worse, and maybe more miraculous than anything she could have imagined. Lauren's legs trembled as she followed Calder deeper into the trees. Ethan stayed behind near the bus, too stunned to speak. The forest grew denser, darker, as if it were absorbing the light around them. Every step forward pulled Lauren further from the world she knew and deeper into one that had been hidden for almost 2 decades. They came to a clearing, and there they were, children, or not quite children anymore. Teenagers in the bodies of young adults, standing in silence beneath the trees, watching her. There were 14 of them. Their faces carried traces of the 12-year-olds from the missing posters. But time had bent them strangely. Their eyes looked older than they should have, not tired, but distant, like they had seen something the rest of the world hadn't. In the center stood Madison. Lauren's breath caught. Her cousin's hair was longer, her frame leaner, but her eyes, those warm brown eyes, were unmistakable. Madison, Lauren whispered. Madison took a cautious step forward. You shouldn't have come. Tears spilled down Lauren's cheeks. 18 years, Maddie. We thought you were dead. The world mourned you. I mourned you. What is this place? Madison looked at Calder, then at the others behind her. We were kept safe for a reason, away from the noise, away from what was coming. We're not like everyone else anymore. Lauren's voice cracked. But you're alive. You could have come home. Madison shook her head. This is home now. Lauren dropped to her knees. All this time. The guilt, the nightmares, the years of therapy and avoidance, the part of her that refused to feel joy, because joy would mean accepting Madison was truly gone. And now here she was, not dead, not broken, just changed. Lauren looked up at her, eyes pleading. Then why the bracelet? Why the coordinates? Why bring me here? Madison hesitated. Because one of us wants to leave, and someone needed to know. Lauren's breath caught again. You? Madison didn't answer. Behind her, another girl, blonde, quiet, stepped forward. Me. Madison touched Lauren's shoulder gently. We remember you, all of us, but we're not who we were. We don't belong in that world anymore. Lauren looked around at the others. Some faces softened. Others stayed blank. The forest was so quiet it rang in her ears. You have a choice, Madison said softly. Tell the world, or let us stay hidden. Lauren stared at her cousin, the cousin who never got to go to high school, never had a first love, never got to live the life she'd been cheated out of. And yet, she wasn't begging for rescue. She was asking for peace, and Lauren would have to decide whether to take this truth back to the world or bury it with the silence that had protected it for 18 years. She closed her eyes. Her heart felt like it would split, because either way, someone would be lost. 2 months later, the bracelet sat inside a wooden box on Lauren's bookshelf, beside a photo of Madison as a child, all crooked teeth and sparkly sneakers. The media never got the story. She never wrote it. Not because she didn't believe in the truth, but because she finally understood it didn't belong to her. She'd driven back to Portland in silence, carrying something heavier than she ever had before. And yet, for the first time in years, the weight wasn't crushing. It was grounding. Madison was alive. She had chosen her path, and Lauren had chosen not to steal it. Ethan didn't take it so easily. He tried to convince Lauren to go public, threatened to do it himself, but in the end, he didn't. Maybe he knew the truth would never be understood, or maybe he simply respected his sister's right to choose her own life. Lauren returned to her old apartment, but something had shifted. The neatness, once her shield, now felt like a prison. She donated most of her things, kept only what mattered. Then she did something she hadn't done in 18 years. She wrote, but not for the public, not for fame. She wrote to Madison, a letter every Sunday, some long, some only a paragraph. She never mailed them. She left them in the wooden box, beside the bracelet, like offerings at a grave that didn't exist. She knew she might never see her again. But that wasn't the point. The point was that Madison had never really vanished. She had simply stepped into a life no one else was meant to follow. And Lauren, after all the grief, guilt, and searching, had finally let her go. Not with pain, but with love. And sometimes that's the closest we get to peace. Some disappearances aren't about being lost. They're about choosing a place where the world can no longer reach you. Lauren used to think closure meant answers, but now she knew. Sometimes closure is simply the decision to stop chasing ghosts and start honoring who they chose to become. She never saw Madison again, but every Sunday, as the sun touched the edge of her apartment window, she lit a candle, placed a letter in the box, and whispered into the quiet, "Wherever you are, I see you. I still see you." And in that silence, for the first time in 18 years, the forest inside her finally felt still. Craving twisted mysteries and haunting tales? Hit subscribe before this story fades into the shadows.